I should have said at the beginning, my name's Laurel Townhead. I'm Human Rights and Refugees Representative for the Quaker United Nations Office based in Geneva. And our organisation I work for the Human Rights and Refugees programme, so we have for many decades worked on refugee issues and refugee protection, particularly connected to those fleeing conflict or issues surrounding that. And we worked very closely for a while. We work around developing guidance either from UNHCR itself, the UN High Commission for Refugees, or through its executive committee, which is its member state body, to try and develop those standards and guidance on refugee status. And we worked particularly with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees on the guideline that they produced on claims for refugee status related to military service, which has a significant focus on conscientious objectors. And it's that kind of guidance that we look to help try and produce so that it can be used in country. And as we have been hearing, it doesn't get used in the ways we'd like to see. And that's what Najma will talk about later. I don't know if Semi or Natalia is going next for War Resisters International, but over to you.
Thank you, Laurel. Okay, my mic is okay. All right. Thank you, Laurel. So Laurel told about the webinar series that we have been doing, and this is the 5th one. And thank you for joining us today. So at WRI, we work to support conscientious objectors around the world. WRI is, for those of you who might not know WRI, it's a global network of anti-militarists and pacifists. And conscientious objection is one of our major work supporting conscientious objectors around the world. And this includes right to asylum of conscientious objectors as well. So we are happy to be part of one of the co-hosts of this webinar. Many conscientious objectors are forced to leave their countries due to the persecution that they are facing, but their right to asylum is usually not recognized. So we find this theme particularly very important, as it is very, very problematic issue, as other co-hosts of this webinar would agree as well. Right to asylum of conscientious objectors is sort of like a rolling theme for us. Last year we did another webinar together with Kuno again. Laurel was one of the speakers, and also Rudy, whose recordings, by the way, you can reach together with the recordings of the previous webinars as part of this webinar series. I'm going to put a link on the chat box here. This is our YouTube channel, Refuse to Kill, so you can reach out the recording from the webinar last year, as well as recordings from this year, as I said. And this, as I said, this theme, a right to asylum of conscientious objectors, is a rolling theme for us, and we want to continue working on this theme, and pay more attention on this subject, attract more attention. And in this webinar, you will hear more in a bit, but we will share from our recent publication, which is Conscientious Objection in Turkey, which includes information on conscientious objection movement in Turkey, as well as the experiences of conscientious objectors who are in exile at the moment, conscientious objectors from Turkey who are in exile at the moment, who have or who are at the moment going through, who have gone or who are at the moment going through asylum process in different European countries. We will be able to hear more about the content of this publication in a bit, but that's it from us for the moment. I think I will pass it to Zaira. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurel and Semi. So my name is Zaira Zafarana, and I'm the coordinator of the UN program of International Fellowship of Reconciliation. I4 has been involved in conscientious objection since the beginning. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation is a spiritual-based movement. It started in 1914, right with the refusal to engage in the First World War. So many of the members were objectors, they were jailed, persecuted, and this is part of our roots. And currently, we continue to engage on conscientious objection on a different level. Particularly, we use our consultative status at the UN to bring this subject to the agenda of different international meetings, particularly at the Human Rights Council. Each session we do participate, we take the floor and make statements whenever it is possible to introduce this issue. And also we participate in the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council and the Human Rights Committee sessions. These two particularly bodies engage on reviews of country, and we are able to submit reports on the situation of human rights in several countries, and we particularly focus on conscientious objection. So far we have been able to cover several countries and to update on the situation, report individual cases, and provide support for objectors in different countries. For instance, one of the recent one was a submission on the situation in Turkey, and we will hear more later. And the other things that I can say is that we continue to engage on this work, as we said, and it is particularly important to be able to support the local work and create a link between the local level, the national level, and the international level. And this is why, with our partner CUNO and WRI, we have been able to provide different aid and support to objectors. So thank you very much for joining today. And as Laura anticipated, the first presentation will be given by I4. As we said, many of the first steps of I4 and the first action initiatives were particularly about conscientious objections. Many of the members are objectors, and about 1 month ago, on the International Day for Conscientious Objection, May 15, I4 decided to collect testimonies from all around the world of I4 members, and they shared their experience and why did they decide to object, and how was or how their life was changed because of that decision. And this also regards difficulties and persecution that they faced. This is not an issue of the past, it continues to be a current issue. And I will briefly share about this special publication that we had just a month ago. I think you can see, so just to briefly share, we made a call within all our membership, and many submitted their particular experiences. So you will find pictures and stories that you can read, and insights on the issue of conscientious objection. Some are from the past, some others are about current work that the different branches of I4 are undertaking locally. I will share the link of this special publication on the chat so that you can explore more on your own. And today I'm pleased to introduce one of these testimony, and we have the privilege of listening the live testimony of one of these members. His name is Pete Hammerle, and he is a member of I4 from the Austrian branch. So I give the floor to Pete, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Zaira. Good afternoon from Vienna. I've been asked to contribute on my personal experience with conscientious objection, and I will try to do so in a short presentation. I would say that my decision for conscientious objection to military service took place in two phases. The first one was with the age of 18 years in the late 1970s, in the midst of Cold War, and in a neutral country, Austria, that had just introduced legislation on conscientious objection and alternative service a few years earlier. My decision at that time and with that age was mainly an individual decision. And it was based on my conviction that I did not want to take anyone's life, nor to prepare for doing so in an institution like the army. I was, and I still am, convinced that no one is allowed to take the life of another person under no circumstances, and this was the basis for my personal decision to refuse to join the army for reasons of conscience. Soon after the draft, I had to prove my reasons in front of a state commission, which in my case was fortunately possible without big difficulties. And this was also the first time when I came in touch with active nonviolence and with the International Fellowship of Reconciliation. The second phase was in 1985, after having moved to Vienna, finished my studies, and becoming involved in the peace movement, which, as you know, at this time was quite popular in Europe. And I was very glad to have the possibility to do my civil alternative service in the office of I4 Austria. And there I was supported in my decision to boycott a part of a mandatory preparation course for so-called civilian national defense, which just had been introduced by the government at that time. At this time, my decision for this boycott was much more politically motivated decision, was following my original decision to object, and finally it resulted in a fine, in a monetary fine. I had to pay for this action, but that was it more or less for the consequences in my case. So it's not a heroic story. I think it is a quite normal story in some way for the time when I took this decision. I did it because I felt it was the right thing for me to do. And I did not have to fear grave disadvantages or consequences for my life from it. But still, I think it was a decision that formed my life. And as you can see, I'm still with I4 after 35 years. And so it had a big influence on my personal life that I took this decision with 18 years at that time and followed it up until today, I would say. Yeah, that's for my short statement. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to all of you for listening to this presentation on I4 contribution on conscientious objection.
Okay, so we will have Ercan as our second speaker. Ercan is a conscientious objector from Turkey who is at the moment living in France, who sought asylum in France, and he has been in France for 4 years now. And he was an active one of the active campaigners for conscientious objection in Turkey. Let me just, let's do this. So we will listen to Ercan now. Ercan's story, his experience as a conscientious objector in Turkey, and also his journey to France. And Ercan will be speaking in Turkish. So I will help him in translation. There will be consecutive translation together with Tuğçe if needed. So yes, Ercan, now we can listen to you. Ercan, seni tanıttım, şimdi seni dinleyebiliriz. Evet. Ercan, you need to Ercan mikrofonunu açman lazım.
Açık şu an. Açık mı?
Tamam, duyabiliyorum, evet.
Herkese çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ercan Can Aktaş. Medya, akademi ve aktivizm alanında çalışmalar yürütüyorum. Türkiye'deyken de bu alanlarda çalışıyorum. Vicdani reddici olmamın temel nedeni Türkiye'de doğarken bir savaşın içine doğuyor olmam. 40 yıldır Türkiye'de Kuzey Kürdistan'da bir savaş devam ediyor ve ben ortaokul, lise, üniversite sürecimde politikleşirken her gün bu savaşa dair haberleri okuyordum, gelişmeleri izliyordum.
Ercan, çevireyim mi?
Oui.
Okay, all right. So Ercan works in media. He has been active in media, in academia, and part of activist circles in Turkey for quite a long time. Within Turkey, the main reason he became a conscientious objector is related to the fact that he was born into a war context, conditions of war in Turkey. There has been an ongoing war in Turkey in North Kurdistan for 40 years. So during since his childhood, from secondary school to primary school, secondary school, university, etc., he was always being exposed to this violent context. Ercan, devam edebiliriz.
Tamamen ırkçı ve militer politikalarla Kürtlerle savaşan, Kürtlerin yaşadıkları kentleri, köyleri başlarına yıkan, Alevileri katleden, Ermenileri düşman olarak belleyen, Rumların evlerini işaretleyen, yani böyle ırkçı ve militer bir sistem içerisinde onun bir parçası olmayacağıma zaten karar vermiştim. Üniversitede itibaren de yoğun olarak politik faaliyetler içerisinde yer aldım.
I was witnessing the racist and militarist policies of the Turkish state towards Kurdish, towards Greek population, towards Armenian population and minority. So witnessing this militarist and racist policies, ongoing policies in Turkey, made me more politicized, even more politicized. And particularly during my studies at the university, so I decided to be a conscientious objector.
Bu politik mücadele içerisinde yer alırken tutuklandım. 9 yıl, 4 ay, 15 gün cezaevinde kaldım. Cezaevindeyken okuduğum makaleler üzerine vicdani redditle tanıştım. Ve o zaman kafamda yerleşti. Zaten hani bu işi yapmayacaktım ama adının ne olduğunu cezaevinden öğrendim.
Okay, sorry, a bit of okay. Karar verdin değil mi? Öncesinde karar vermiştin ama adını bilmiyordun. Hani
Bilmiyordum, ne olduğunu
yapmak
bilmiyordum.
istemiyordun. Okay,
Evet.
right. A bit of a correction. Okay, when he was in the university, he decided he doesn't want to do military service, but he didn't know what conscientious objection is. But due to his political work, his activism, his political engagement, he was imprisoned for 9 years, 9 yıl.
9 yıl. 9,5 yıl.
9.5 years. He stayed in prison for 9.5 years, and during his serving in prison, he did some readings and came across with conscientious objection, and he decided that he's a conscientious objector.
2004 yılında cezaevinde çıktım. 2005 yılında İzmir'de vicdani reddetimi deklare ettim ve o tarihten itibaren de savaş karşı hareket içerisinde bir fiil çalışmalarımı yürütüyorum.
In 2004, I was released from prison, and in 2005, I declared my conscientious objection. And since Izmir, you said İzmir dedin değil mi? In Izmir.
Oui.
And since then, from 2005, I started being part of the anti-war movement in Turkey.
Türkiye'de bu çalışmalar içerisinde yer alırken 2015-16'da hakkımda 3 tane dava açıldı. madde 318 halkı askerlikten soğutmak, madde 301 devlete devlet büyüklerine hakaret, 3. maddede Türkiye'nin Kürdistan'daki savaş politikalarını eleştirdiğim için terör örgütü propagandası yapmaktan dolayı hakkımda 3 tane mahkeme açıldı. Ben de bir daha cezaevine düşmemek için Türkiye'yi terk ettim.
Yılları bir daha söyleyebilir misin Ercan?
2016'da.
2016'da.
Hakkımda 3 tane dava açıldı, evet.
3 dava, 318 dedin.
301
301. 301
ve
neydi?
301 de hani Tayyip Erdoğan hakaret.
Ha, okey. Okey. Diğeri
Hani devletin savaş politikasını eleştirdiğim için hani örgüt propagandası yapmak.
318, 301 diğeri neydi?
Örgüt propagandası.
Yo, o 300 kaç yani madde neydi?
Ha, onun maddesini bilmiyorum.
Ha, tamam, önemli değil, tamam.
Evet.
Sorry. During his political activism in Turkey in 2016, he was opened 3 cases against him in relation to Article 318 of Turkish Criminal Code, which defines a crime called alienating public from military service. And another case in relation to humiliating Tayyip Erdoğan. Well, it's not exactly the name of the, like how it is framed in Turkish law, but it says humiliating devlet büyükleri, statesman, humiliating statesman in Turkey. There's an article 301 in criminal code, and there was another case he was opened was in relation to, because of his political word, he was accused of doing terrorist propaganda. So there were 3 cases against him in 2016, and rather than going through this process, he decided to leave Turkey.
Paris'e geldikten sonra da Brüksel'deki barış evi gibi bir statüsü olan barış gemisinde yaşamaya başladım. Barış gemisi üzerinde de gene savaş karşıtı antimilitarist ve vicdanlı toplantıları, atölyeleri, etkinlikleri ve buluşmalar yapıyoruz. O süreçte Tuğçe'nin de içinde olduğu bir grup arkadaş olarak bizler l'Objection de Conscience pour la Paix grubunu oluşturduk ve çalışmalarımızı bu grupla devam ediyoruz.
Okay. Türkçesini söylesene o grubun adının İngilizce için.
Barış için vicdani.
Okay.
Paris.
So after coming to Paris, I met people from Peace House in Paris. Barış Evi dedin değil mi?
Barış gemisi.
Barış gemisi. Peace ship in Paris. It's like a collective of people who are campaigning for peace, and he continued campaigning, like he continued his work for conscientious objection, raising awareness on conscientious objection and the situation of conscientious objectors in Paris as part of this collective, and then later with others in France. Sadece Fransa'da mı, başka ülkelerde var mıydı?
Türkiye'de de böyle bir ekip vardı ama biz Paris ekibiyiz.
Ya Barış için Vicdani Ret ekibi sadece Paris'tekiler değil mi?
Paris'te.
Okay.
Evet.
And then later in Paris, following up this work on conscientious objection, they set up a group called Conscientious Objectors for Peace in Paris. So he's currently being as part continue his activism as part of this group in Paris. Bu arada yani, sen şeysin, onu da söyleyelim, hani mültecisin şeyde, Paris.
Mülteciyim, politik mülteciyim.
And he's a political refugee in France at the moment.
Aynı şekilde şu an Paris'te bir sosyal bilim bir üniversitede de master'ımı gene vicdan ret üzerine yapıyorum. Ve vicdan ret üzerine hani çeşitli sitelere, Demokrat Haber, Kurdistan, işte Prezansa'ya yazılar yazıyorum, dosyalar yapıyorum. Aynı zamanda sivil toplumda çalışmaya devam ediyorum.
He continues working in civil society in France, and he writes about conscientious objection to a number of websites, news websites, as well as at the moment he's doing his master's degree in social sciences, and he's writing a dissertation on conscientious objection at the moment. Rachel, in response to your question, let me confirm this Ercan again, but he's recognized as a refugee. Sen refugee olarak tanındın değil mi? Yani mültecisin şu an resmi olarak.
Evet, tanındım.
Yes, he's a refugee. He's recognized as a refugee. Bu kadar. Okay. So yeah, Ercan, thanks. That's what we will hear from Ercan. Let me know if there are any questions. Any questions to Ercan?
So I have to. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to be with you today, and yeah, I was really happy that we could make this booklet, because we had the idea to ask the conscientious objectors from Turkey who are in exile, what could we do to May 15? So Ercan was one of it, Mercan, Beran Ahmed Ishchi, and some others. And then we decided together it should be such kind of booklet describing the different stories of them, the different experiences they made. And these are stories which are really impressive. Also for me, I worked to this issue since 30 years, but I was really impressed by the stories. What I contributed to it was a bit the question, what might be possible for objectors from Turkey to ask for asylum and to get asylum or to get a refugee status. Normally, Simi mentioned it in the beginning, normally they are rejected. The normal argumentation is that they are not allowed to get asylum. And I would like to show you, just a moment, I've prepared a presentation. So let me do this. So now you can see it, I guess. And here is the booklet, and it's in 4 languages. So everybody has a chance to read it. Unfortunately, not in Spanish. So we are missing Spanish. But it was a hard work, and it was great that we could do it. Yeah, that's what the authorities are normally saying. Conscription is a general state duty that affects all citizens equally, and therefore prosecution and punishment for refusal are classified as legitimate state action. That's the normal decision. So Ercan told about one possibility already. He had 3 cases on political level because of political activities in Turkey. And this is, in fact, one reason which gives the possibility to get a refugee status. This is one thing. And what I want to refer to is some things what happened in the last 15 years, more than 15 years, because there is going on a discussion about it, and Najma will talk about it as well. But I would like to mention some very important steps. So one is the EU Qualification Directive to refugee status, which is from 2004. This is very important, especially for conscientious objectors who act because they don't want to be in violent action, don't want to be involved in violent action. There was a decision of the European Court some months ago to Syria, where this came in effect. And then we have 2006, the case of Öke versus against Turkey. It's Osman Murat Öke. We spoke about his case, and he went to the European Court of Human Rights, and there was a very important decision, because the European Court of Human Rights, it's a violation of Article 3 that they are prosecuted. Then they get a new call up, then they have to go to the military again, and then they are prosecuted. And so it's a vicious circle, which has an effect like a civil death. And it's not only the prosecution, it's also the normal life of the most of conscientious objectors in Turkey. They don't have, they are missing a lot of normal civil rights: to vote, to have an account, study, to work, and something else. And the European Court of Human Rights defined this as civil death. That was an important step. Another one is, some years later, in 2011, the European Court of Human Rights decided that conscientious objection is a human right. It was a case from one objector from Armenia. And then there is a decision of the UN Human Rights Council to conscientious objection at asylum, saying that states should consider granting asylum to conscientious objector if they face fear of persecution. And then there is guidelines from the UNHCR. Najma will talk about it later. So now I thought to give you two examples, but just to say they are in the booklet. I will give you the link to the booklet. One is Bira Mehmet Işçi. He is in Germany now. He was rejected from the federal office. Another one is Onur Erdem with a really heavy story and a long story. He was rejected as well. He is in Germany, in Nuremberg in the moment. And in both cases, the German authorities were saying they can pay €5,000, and then the time of the military service is reduced. That's okay for you. So they denied the decision of them to be conscientious objectors and to be against every military service. Now I want to mention some points which I think it's important for cases, especially from Turkey, to the law of asylum and referring to the different background and legal possibilities. One is the excluding from the civil rights. I talked about this. And if this is seen as a civil death by the European Court of Human Rights, it should refer to Article 15 of the Directive of the European Union, where are said that people who are who has to face inhuman treatment, they should have get a subsidiary protection, and this should be then the case for Turkish objectors. This could be an argument. Of course, we know that the situation for refugees in Europe is not really good, so the most are denied, and it is really difficult to get asylum, but this could be an argument for. Then, of course, there is an argument that there is a lack of the right to conscientious objection, especially with referring to the decision of the European Court of Human Rights. And this means also 1 month military service is 1 month too much, because it's a decision from the conscience and a decision against any military service. And the Federal Office of Germany is totally wrong in these cases. Then there is another argumentation which the UNHCR is presenting in its paper. Conscientious objectors could be seen as a social group. If you take a look for Turkey especially, you have to see this combination of civil deaths, the prosecution, the lifelong conscription system, the vicious circle. All of these things are showing that they are really seen as a social group, and that means they should be seen as a social group as defined by the Geneva Convention. I think Najma will talk about it later on again. And at the last, my last point is we try to support a lot of them who try to get asylum in Germany, and in a lot of cases we were successful in the past, in the 3 decades now. But it is always very difficult to that people who are coming and asking for asylum realize that they have to tell more about their conscientious objection. Their idea of conscientious objection is very often like the idea, I don't want to fight in the military, or I don't want to fight against my people, or I'm against war and oppression in my country. For me, it is totally okay, and I agree with it, but it's not enough for the asylum proceedings. In the asylum proceedings, the court and the federal office are looking much more to the jurisdiction which has developed in the past decades to the proceedings concerning German conscientious objectors. And that means that they have to tell much more about their background, how they came to the decision to be a conscientious objector, to show that they are that they are conscientious objector, and to give high credibility for this decision. Therefore, I say it is always very, very important that people who are thinking about this way, they should get in contact with organizations like QNO or Sisters International, like I4, other organizations who are working to this issue, to get good advice and to get support to prepare the asylum seeking process before they go. Very often we have to see that it's we see it after the first decision of the federal office or after the decision of the court, and then it's sometimes a bit too late. So if you hear from anybody who is thinking about, please get in contact with us. So that's it from my side. Thanks a lot for your time.